All right, I think everything's on. I think we're recording. All right, so despite my best laid plans, Monday I did the last video and he looked a little off at the trot. He had had a few days off, and I think the last video was just the trotting on the long reins on the big circle. So the next day, circumstantially and weather-wise, I just couldn't video until today. Today's Thursday. And so the very next day, Tuesday, I just opted to do the long reins again because he had started off looking a tiny bit lame. And so I just repeated what I did on Monday on Tuesday. And instead of what I said on the video, I ended up just doing 10 minutes of trot work on the big circles and then 20 minutes of walking on the small circles to work on more engagement in case he was starting to change muscularly and maybe get a little bit lame. He didn't show any more lameness at all, so I'm sort of chalking that up to the arthritis in the hocks after he has some time off. So then Wednesday, yesterday, I tightened up the long reins circle at the trot just a few feet, not too much. And he was able to maintain the trot, so I'll show you that next week. But I was really happy that tightening up the circle is what gives me more engagement, which is the whole work in progress with him, rebuilding these hindquarters, re-engaging them, and getting him to use his back and hindquarters to control his balance, stabilize his body weight. So then the ride yesterday, I also discovered he's ready for me to stay more on one direction, under saddle. So I'm just warming him up with and steering with the reins. He still, you can see, likes to root. And this is, I'm going to give him just 5 minutes of a really easy figure eight. Just sort of taking one rein to the other. The last riding video, I showed you a couple of strategies I played with to see if I could stop the rooting. And that was so bad, I gave it up the very next day. So he can root to his heart's content. He can push on the bit to his heart's content. I am just not interfering with him with the reins. I suspect, even though he's improving his engagement, that when I really kept his neck straight on the figure eight is where I got more and more rooting. So the easy figure eight is a little bit of a neck bend. I don't know what he's distracted by. So we're just going to get his attention, get his head back in the game. A little bit of a tighter turn. So I'm giving this about 5 minutes or so. Just letting him, when I have to bend the neck to make the turn, it's going to exaggerate the unlevelness of his back, but it also does help him place the hind leg a little bit deeper. So I'm not too fussy in the beginning about whether or not I have to bend the neck. Like I said, I'm just giving him 5 minutes. And you can see the pushing on the bit is already better without me making a big deal out of it at all. As the trot's getting better, as the hindquarter engagement is getting better, the rooting, the pulling, the falling forward drastically like he's been doing is also getting better. He's just not doing it as much. So I'll give this a few more minutes. And then what I found yesterday, which I haven't done with him so far, is staying on one direction longer sometimes gives the horse the time to make the changes that we're looking for. Just gentle repetition on one direction until they get the hang of using one hind leg better, then changing direction and working on the other hind leg a little bit until that gets more stable and more comfortable. The reason I haven't done it with him so far is because I've been a little protective in getting him to use the hind legs correctly and the hind quarter and muscling that up. It's just those x-rays are in my mind of how bad the arthritis is. So when you change direction, it's a little harder for them to really stabilize on either hind leg. Changing direction is harder to maintain balance than changing speed. But I didn't want to tax one hind leg or the other either. That's when you stay on one direction, you're kind of gently placing that inside hind leg over and over and over, and you're waiting for the body to get comfortable with a new placement of the inside hind leg and letting the body adapt around it. So that's roughly 5 minutes. You can see he's slowing way down. He had a nice blow. He's not pushing on the bit nearly as much. I still feel like going to the right is his harder direction for the hind leg. So now I'm just going to stay on the right, and I'm just going to show you just 5 minutes of each direction, right? So I'm just going to stay on a right-hand circle, and I spiral in and out. If he loses forward, I'm going to make the circle a little bigger. If he has too much forward, I'm going to make the circle a little smaller. If, as I circle around, like just there, I can feel the hind leg under my seat. So that means this right hind leg placement is sort of in close enough to the center of his body that he could use it to stabilize his balance, right? He's a little unstable. He's throwing a lot of weight towards my left leg. So I'm having to really sit to the right. I may have to bend the neck a little to get started as I spiral in. So there where he loses forward, I'm just going to make the circle maybe 1 foot bigger. I'm not going out and in a lot, right? But I want to find the tightness of the circle where I feel that inside hind leg. I feel the hoof landing under my seat. If I can't feel the hind leg, I'm going to keep spiraling in until I feel it. So it's not that we don't have feel. We can all feel when the hind leg is underneath. Most of the time, it's not underneath. So that's why we think we can't feel it. But as soon as we start spiraling in, we want to find that place, which is very specific, changes all the time. So specific for the moment, changes ride to ride, can even change in one ride, but I'm always looking for the blend of where I feel the hind leg and where the horse, even if it's very slow, offers to maintain forward without me having to use constant leg aids or drive with my seat. My seat's job is stabilizing, and I've got to keep a lot of weight on my right side because his back is still wanting to push my weight over to the other side. Now, if he gets distracted like that, I need the ear back on me. If he's not feeling safe and comfortable and really mentally focused, he can't make these changes in his coordination. So I don't tolerate the distraction. I don't care what's over there. It's just an excuse. So you can see my circle is not accurate, but I'm always trying to find that combination of where I feel the inside hind coming up. Typically the speed will slow down as they're learning engagement, but I don't want them to shut down. So here, where I'm having to push with my legs because he wants to stop, that tells me start spiraling back out a little bit. If his head isn't in the game, then I'm going to bend the neck and make a turn in order to get the ear on me. If the ear's on me, he's working on it. Right? So there's the rooting again. And there's the distraction again. And the distraction can just be the horse's way of telling you, this is hard. And I get it. Of course it's hard. That leg has been in storage, decorative but not functional, for a while. So knocking the rust off that hind leg, keeping him focused, keeping the hind leg stepping under. It's not perfect. He's not exactly level through the back or straight through the neck. But right now, I'm just trying to get him comfortable with the right hind leg a little bit deeper under the body. So if you don't mind, 5 minutes, barely made a dent. I'm going to stay on this direction another 5 minutes. I need him focused. I need him calm. Even if it's one step at a time, forward is his job, not mine. And then I have to watch where he's trying to throw my body weight. So he keeps trying to throw it. That's why I'm this far to the right of the saddle, because he keeps trying to throw it into my left leg, and he keeps trying to throw me backwards into my left leg. So I'm having to adjust myself forward and into my right leg to keep my balance and influence his movement. There, and he seems to, because you can see step after step after step after step, I just want the placement of the hind leg, not disengaging. I don't want to cross the midline with the hind leg, but I just want that hind leg up and under, step after step after step. Oh, I don't know what that big noise was. And I want him thinking about how to resist falling forward from the improved engagement or improved deeper placement of his right hind leg. Right? I need his brain in the game, so I need the ears halfway like that or back on me. That tells me when to use the rein or when not to use the rein. I'm not having to use leg. He's motoring forward very carefully. And this is what drives people crazy, this speed. This is the speed at which he can start to use at least one hind leg more correctly. Right? So I just need him step after step after step after step to keep placing the right hind closer to his center and start getting comfortable flexing it more, extending it more, and resisting, using it to resist his own body weight from falling forward. Right? And you'll see the better he gets behind me, which we're just scratching the surface when I show you the warm-up, the better he gets at using this right hind leg. It's directly related, that and the tightness through his shoulders are directly related to the reason he falls forward so much and pushes on the bit. Right, so I got about 2 more minutes this way, and 10 minutes on one direction sort of feels like his maximum anyways. Right? It doesn't seem like a lot of work, but that hind quarter and both hind legs have really not been doing their job. So it's atrophied a bit. It's kind of rusty. There is arthritis. And so we're just going to slowly, there, that was nice. That was nice. Then he could lengthen his neck without pulling. But trying to use the reins at all with him, it just sort of pissed him off, and it just made him worse. So I go, feel free to root away. So I know it probably bothers you to see him push on the bit like that, but you can see ride by ride, even in the warm-up, which is where it happens the most, it's really getting to be less and less as we go through building up the hindquarters. Very good. So now he's actually starting to resist a little bit of his body weight, and it got less clunky and a little more smooth back there on that right hind. He just threw me to the left, as I was about to say. He isn't throwing me to the left as hard, which tells me he's relaxing into that deeper placement of the right hind leg and starting to use it correctly. But you can see it's difficult for him. So this is about the speed I would expect. It's not going to be competitive looking movement. So that's 10 minutes to the right, his harder side first. Then I'm just going to change direction, and we're going to do 10 minutes to the left. And then I'm pretty much, this is the ride today. His trot has really been improving on the long reins, and even to the point I could tighten up that circle a little bit on the long reins and he could comfortably maintain the trot. I keep thinking I should trot him under saddle, but when I get on him, it still feels so unstable that going into trot, I almost feel like it wouldn't build him up quite with as much conscious control over his hindquarter. I may try it tomorrow. I just have this gut feeling, like just as he's learning to slow down and control his body weight, I don't want to ask him to do that with more pushing power. So far, I feel like he's steadily making nice improvements with riding like this to build up the strength and the stability of the hindquarters at the walk, and continuing to let him work out the trot without weight on his back, but still helping in the same dimension of keeping him level on a circle. And the tighter I can make the circle at trot, the more he's learning to engage at trot. When he could only trot on a bigger circle, he can't really engage, but that's where he was comfortable starting, right? And to be able to tighten up that trot circle and have him comfortably maintain trot and feel him get more stable, less rooting at the walk, is kind of where my intuition is guiding me for this horse. I just feel like he has so much to think about at the walk, and he's still so unstable with each improvement of engagement that I just don't feel like I want to ask for trot under saddle just yet. I may experiment with it, and I'll videotape it if I do. But so far, the rooting is starting to go away, and his attention is on me more. So again, as we go to the left, my circle is not precise. If he loses forward, I'm spiraling out. If he doesn't turn, I have to bend the neck a little. This direction, he tries to throw me to the outside, just like the other direction, and he tries to throw me backwards. So I'm a little forward in my left with my weight to the left to resist that. And then I'm playing with spiraling in, spiraling out on the circle until I find that balance of there where I feel the hind leg underneath. And again, if you can't feel it, it's not engaged. Everybody can feel an engaged hind leg. So I need to be able to feel that inside hind stepping, stepping, stepping underneath me, and not have to use a lot of leg to keep him going. He can choose his speed. It can literally be one step at a time. That's how they learn, right? But if I have to put leg on, that also tells me make the circle a little bit bigger. If I lose his attention, if he gets anxious, or if he suddenly got too fast, which I don't imagine, then I would spiral in, making the circle smaller, right? But if he's concentrating, if he's mentally focused, if he's choosing to stay in the walk, then he's working on it, right? And this doesn't look like much, but it's quite hard because step after step after step after step, for 10 minutes, we're sort of drilling down on that left hind leg. So there, if he gets distracted, I'm just taking his mind off of it. I need his brain here, not in the neighbor's yard. Yeah. Right? Then if he stops, I can make the circle a little bigger, straighten the neck a little bit, right? Very good. So he's just really gently relearning or restoring the functionality to those hind legs, right? He's a pretty talented guy, and he's been getting by as a jumper by pulling himself forward more than he's been pushing himself forward, right? And that's what happens when they get heavier and heavier on the bit and they need more leverage to have control. All that rooting and heaviness kind of confirms, as well as the underdeveloped muscles of the hindquarter, that he's been doing his job pulling more than he's been pushing, right? So as we balance the push with the control over the push, that's what gives you a long neck without pulling or heaviness. This is about what we've got, right? This is about where the pushing and braking equalize, and he can shift from pulling himself forward into pushing himself forward with more self-control over the movement, not just falling on his front legs. Okay? So like I said, even though last video I sent you, I was really playing with some strategies to see if I could just get through that violent pull on the reins, the push on the bit. And it didn't go great in the video, and by the next day I threw it in the bin. Not a bad strategy, but it just made him worse, not better. So I just left it alone. And I go, root to your heart's content, because that ripping the reins, like I keep saying, is directly related to the use of his hindquarters and how well he manages his own body weight internally. Very good. So we have about 2 more minutes this direction. He slowly gets more stable the longer I'm staying on one direction. So changing direction is harder when it comes to balance than changing speed. The change of direction mixes up the body, so the good side of changing direction, like a figure 8, is they can't fix or get stuck. The bad side is they never quite stabilize in their balance. So working on one direction, I was really happy to see him get calmer and more focused when I stayed on one direction, because that's him learning a new coordination relearning to use the hind legs. And it's not uncomfortable for him. That was my biggest fear, is if I stayed on one direction, it would be too much on the one hind leg at a time. So this is kind of an advancement that I did 10 minutes to the right, 10 minutes to the left. Here comes his friend, Prima. So instead of the cat photobombing today, we have the horse photobombing. And Ozzy loves her. Oop. So he's a little distracted. There we go. Good. So that's a 5-minute figure eight, 10 minutes on one direction. My circles aren't super. Oh, there it is. The idea is the change of direction is a gentler warm-up, but more and more, if I can stay on one direction, step after step after step, then he can rearrange his entire body with a change in more functionality of the inside hind leg. And that's where I feel like I really start to rebuild the hindquarters. So I'm excited that he could do that for 10 minutes, like you saw. And so what I'm going to finish up with is I'm going to go 15 minutes back to the right and then do 15 minutes back to the left. And that's our whole hour today. Oh, that might be too long. Hang on, when did I start? Oh, I've only got like another 10 minutes left. Never mind. I did warm him up for 20 minutes trotting on the long reins. So I think what I might go back to then is a figure eight, since I have about 10 minutes. All right, so that's the Ozzy update.